Here we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our special event this evening here in the Village Books Virtual Readings Gallery, aka my home. My name is Claire. I'm the events coordinator at Village Books in Bellingham, Washington. A couple of things, a little bit of business. If you're hearing an echo, try turning down your computer, the speakers on your computer. If you're still hearing an echo, try putting in some headphones. And if that doesn't work, see if you have more than one tab open on your computer. If you have a couple of crowdcasts open, it's going to create some feedback and give you an echo. If those three things don't work, you still have an echo, I don't know what to tell you. I'm so very sorry. Let's see. So while this is happily a free event, as our virtual Lit Live series is here at Village Books, we do appreciate those of you who made contributions on registration when you signed up for this event. So thank you. We really appreciate that support during this strange time that we're in right now. Something about Crowdcast. If you look to the upper right in your screen, you'll see a little button that says follow. If you click on follow, you're going to get updates from the Village Books Crowdcast channel about events that are happening. We have a lot. I'm scheduling many events. They're coming fast and furious. So I encourage you to click that follow button so that you'll see what's coming down the pike. And another very important button on Crowdcast is this one right here. The one that says purchase today, tonight, tomorrow, here. That button takes you directly to the Village Books website, where all of the books of our featured authors this evening are listed. And if you feel so inspired after this evening's talk, please feel free to follow that link and purchase books by the authors. We do have signed book plates available from Jennifer Dugan. So if you order from Village Books, we can get you a signed book plate. And we have an event coming up tomorrow night. Gail Noble Sanderson is going to be here at 7 p.m. She's going to be talking about her third book in her House and Muse series, The Lavender Bees of Muse. That's going to be at 7 p.m. She's going to be in conversation with her sister, Kathy, who actually did the stunning artwork on all of her books. So that's at 7 o'clock tomorrow. If during the event you have a question and that you want to ask, you can go ahead and put it in the chat, or if you look at the bottom of the screen, you'll see something that says ask a question. If you click on ask a question at any time during the event, you can type the question right into there. We'll gather those questions, and then when we get to the Q&A portion, they'll be right there, easy for us to see, and the authors can address. I'm feel sure that we'll have time to do that. So anytime during the event, if something occurs to you and you want to ask them a question, just click on ask a question, type it in. We'll hold that question there and we'll get to it when we get to the Q&A portion. Okay, so I think that's it about business. So first I'd like to say a few words about our moderator this evening. Jennifer Dugan is a writer, a geek, and a romantic. In addition to being the author of Hot Dog Girl and her newest book, Verona Comics. She's also the writer, creator of 2 indie comics. She lives with her family, pets, and a cranky cat, who you might see this evening, I'm not sure, we saw her earlier, who considers himself to be more of a reluctant roommate. So we're very pleased that Jennifer is here with us tonight, so welcome. Rachel Lynn Solomon came to Bellingham, one of our second to last Chuckanut Radio Hour that we were able to host of 2019, the November Radio Hour. Rachel was our guest, and gosh, I look back on those days now and it just seems like so long ago. But Rachel Lynn Solomon is the author of You'll Miss Me When I'm Gone and Our Year of Maybe, and she's here to present her brand new novel, Today, Tonight, Tomorrow. Of this book, one of my young adult review committee members, who I know is in the house this evening, hello, there's 2 of them actually in the house this evening. So Gretel had this to say about Today, Tonight, Tomorrow. Today, Tonight, Tomorrow is the most Seattle book I've ever had the pleasure of reading. A phenomenal author, Rachel Lynn Solomon, is from the area, and it absolutely shows. This book is adorable, romantic, and all around perfection. I cannot recommend it enough. Rachel Lynn is a Seattle native who loves rainy days, her tiny dog, tap dancing, old movies, red lipsticks, and books with flawed, complicated characters. So please join me in welcoming Jennifer Dugan and Rachel Lynn Solomon.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yes, hi, and thank you. And it's so nice to get to talk to Jen. We've mutually fangirled over each other's books for a long time, so it's exciting to be chatting.
Yeah, this is our first time out of DMs.
Actually. I know. it always feels like a really big step in a friendship when you go from like DMs to like texting, and then but going straight to video, I feel like we skipped so many steps. We're just did like all the bases at once. But yeah, so I wanted to just start with both of us just giving a little elevator pitch of our books for anyone who's not familiar with our most recent releases. And then we have a bunch of questions for each other. And like Claire said, feel free to pop any questions in the chat box that you have. So yeah, Today, Tonight, Tomorrow just came out 3 weeks ago. Whoa, it's like a cool like mirror image type thing almost that I'm seeing. And it is a YA romantic comedy that takes place all in 24 hours on the last day of senior year, and it has that beautiful little bench under the dust jacket. And it follows rival overachievers who realize on the last day of senior year that maybe they don't actually hate each other as much as they originally thought. And then Jen's book, Verona Comics, came out in April.
Mm-hmm. So Verona Comics is kind of a loose Romeo and Juliet retelling set in the comic industry that follows a queer couple, Ridley and Jubilee, as they try to navigate first love, complicated family dynamics, and feuding families, all set within this comic world. So I thought we would just jump right into it because I have like a billion questions for you. So the first one is that I really love in both of our books, the love interests are not these like typical like tough, cool guys. So what drew you to that? Like what drew you to write the perfect boy of Neil?
Thank you. Well, so it was definitely something that I did consciously. I think so many love interests, especially in YA, are like these very suave, like almost like alpha males in training. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to write someone who was like awkward and nerdy, and like most of the guys that I dated or had crushes on, I was just I just like love a nerd. I love a nerd. And I felt like, the kinds of teen guys who are just like average, normal, like not the sort of like mini alpha males. They're not really getting to be the love interests in romance. So I wanted to show someone who was just sort of a little less polished and just really kind of fumbling through these different steps of a relationship, because I felt like that would be really relatable. And then I also, just as sort of a personal challenge to myself, like I wanted to try to make him in the beginning as unappealing as possible. Like I wanted you to be able to see all the things that Rowan dislikes about him, even as you're so sure that she like deep down is in love with him. And so that was just really fun to like go so hard on these traits that she dislikes, and then have it turn around, around the midpoint, and have her realize like, oh wait, he's actually cute. Just in the way that like when you start liking someone, they immediately become more attractive to you, mm-hmm. usually. So yeah, I wanted to play with that. And speaking, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say it felt so real, like I felt like I could walk through and if I walked through a high school, I would see someone like Neil. I thought he was just like so very relatable. I loved him.
Thank you. Yeah, I like being able to write, guys who can cry and like be sensitive and do all these sort of like not stereotypically masculine things that they, in the past, I feel like were not often allowed to do in books, or like, even sometimes in real life, they're often judged for showing weakness like that. And I just really wanted to show that that is okay and normal. But speaking of romance, Verona Comics has one of the best meet cutes that I have ever read. I can't like fully act it out here, but this is Ridley and Jubilee. It is just so adorable, and I immediately was just like obsessed with both characters. I feel like I was just, as soon as I read those first couple chapters, I was in your DMs like, how is this so cute? So for people who haven't read the book yet, could you explain that opening meet cute? And then I'm also curious whether that was always the opening scene, because it is just so perfect.
Yeah, well, so it starts with Jubilee, and she's getting ready. She's going to a Comic-Con prom. She's at a comic convention because her mom's own a comic shop. And her best friend, Jayla, is like very into fashion and costume design. And she kind of hooks her up with this costume where she's this character from one of her mom's book where she's like dressed sort of like a peacock. I actually have this.
So cute.
So you can see like her dress. So she gets into the elevator and she's going to prom, and there's this like anxious bean Ridley in there, and he's just dressed in like a Batman mask, and she has dropped a feather and he like picks it up, and there's this like moment of tension where they're standing in the elevator, and then she lets him keep the feather, and he just dies. So it was, well, usually when I start a story, I have an idea, like a first scene that comes to me. And so the first scene that came to me was actually at the prom, where she uses a balloon to create a bat signal. So that was the first scene in the whole book. But I knew I wanted them to meet like before that and have like an awkward meeting. So that was really, that was pretty much always going to be how it went, I think.
I love that. And that visual, I mean, just the feather and then the bat signal on the balloon that he sees from across the room is so adorable.
Yeah. I wanted to give some little like nerdy nods to people who were like fans. So one of the things that I love about your book, besides the yearbook, which I think is my favorite part of yours, I DM you.
Is it? No. I haven't heard this.
I DM Rachel like probably weekly, just like think about the yearbook. Like, but I love how it happens in such a short amount of time. So how hard was it to like fit this intense, like sort of enemies to romance set all in like this one day?
Yeah, well, so, I mean, it's very clear, right, to anyone who reads romance that they are, of course, in love with each other from the beginning. So that does make it easy, right? Like the fact that I often say they're more rivals than enemies, because there is definitely some respect that they have for each other, right? Like they don't really want anything actually bad to happen to the other person. But so what I did do in order to make the book feel full and fleshed out was there are these little like scrapbook elements in between chapters. So there are text messages, emails, little notes, chats, all kinds of things that serve to kind of illuminate more of their history. Because I didn't want to use flashbacks very much. I wanted this book to feel like a scrapbook, like a snapshot of this last day of school. And honestly, the timeline, like I really feel like the characters are able to have a full emotional arc, even in that short timeline. And it's weird, like all of my first two books are dual POV and they take place over an entire year. They are the same word count as this one. So I have a brand, and that brand is 87,000 word books. I think I also just really love living in like small moments. I think there's so much you can do with I know this is in one of your questions later, but like I love turning a small moment into something big. And I think that almost like encapsulates all of YA. I think like small things always feel big. And we can talk a little more about that later.
Yeah, you are definitely like a master at that. I think when I was reading this book, it was really just like, you know, I think I'm just going to ask you now, like, how do you, you know, there's this one moment, it's about 2/3 through where their shoes are like touching and she's like fixating on that. And I just like felt that, like, I felt that like tension and like, we're not the people whose shoes touch, you know, and it's like such a tiny thing, but it is such a huge moment. How do you capture them? How did you have those like planned out? Where does that come from? Are you just magic purely?
I mean, yes, but I wish. No, like I said, I love small moments. And a while ago, I heard this advice, and I'm sure the person who gave it to me, it wasn't original. Like, I'm sure it's just been recycled and recycled. But it's one of my favorite pieces of writing advice. And it's that things that happen quickly in real life should be slowed down in a book, whereas things that happen slowly in real life should be sped up. So like a very long car ride or a plane ride, that's not going to be super dragged out. But like a kiss, like a first kiss especially, is something that's usually very quick. But in a book, that's like could be easily a page, or if it's one of my books, like 5 pages. And I love that because I am someone who so often when I read romance, like I just want more. Like if I have read 350 pages and then I get like 2 sentences of a kiss, it just feels like a ripoff at that point.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love lingering in those small moments. And like, I like thinking of with a romance, I like thinking of different ways that the characters can interact physically, that shows them getting closer. So with this, yeah, like their shoes are touching at one point. I have them dancing in the library at one point. Mm-hmm. They are completely in the dark in an exhibit in the zoo, and they have to like help each other so the other one doesn't fall. Just these like little kind of unique moments of touch, because I think touch is one of those things that really solidifies like, oh, am I feeling these romantic feelings for someone else? Mm-hmm. That's just a little more different and more unique than just like, he brushes my arm. It's just something that feels a little more unique to those characters. So one thing, so we talked about, or you know, Claire mentioned your first book, Hot Dog Girl, which is really a romantic comedy. Mm-hmm. And then this book, Verona Comics, so Hot Dog Girl is 1 POV and Verona Comics is 2 POVs. And it's very clear which character is speaking at any given time. And after having written 2 dual POV books, I know that's really tough to pull off. And you do an amazing job giving them these distinct voices. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I was curious how you went about that, and yeah, how you ensured that they had these unique voices.
In Verona Comics, it was actually pretty easy because Ridley's voice just exploded off the page. He is so anxious and so stressed out all the time, just constantly needs a hug, really. I just want to like wrap him up in a little blanket. I
just want to show an example because you do such a good job. Just like this line right in the middle. It's just like, don't be creepy, don't be creepy, don't be creepy. Like it's all lowercase and in italics, like all together. And it just is such an amazing, you have those throughout and like they just really solidly place you in his head. Not to interrupt, but just to give that little visual.
Yeah. His internal monologue is like, it can be a very intense place to be. And that was another reason why I wanted to do dual POV with this book. Because at one point I was like, maybe I'll just do it from Jubilee's point of view. But I wanted us to see what Ridley was going through. And then I felt like a book just from Ridley's POV would be it could be hard to, his head is a hard place sometimes, and using, having that break into Jubilee, where you're dealing with someone who has, she has her own set of issues, but she doesn't, overall, she's a pretty happy, upbeat person. It purposely like kind of gives you a break, and also like really contrasts their inner monologues. In my book that's coming out next year, Some Girls Do, which we announced fairly recently, that is another dual POV, and that one is a track star and a beauty queen, and that one I found was much harder to separate. And so I had to do things like think of little like tics, kind of like little kinds of phrase that they use. I made them their own playlists so I could like get in their heads. I will probably like never do dual POV again. It's like so hard.
I know. I said that after You'll Miss Me When I'm Gone. I was like, I'm never doing that again. And then I got the idea for our year maybe, and I'm like, well, this has to be dual POV. But I love what you said about coming up with sort of like little tics or quirks for them, because I will do similar things, even though, yes, I vowed to never write one again, at least not for a while. But I will have lists of like the way that they speak, or certain words that they use, or like depending on their passions, like words that you can kind of substitute for like more common verbs or adjectives or nouns, that just like clue in the reader that like, oh yeah, I'm reading about the character who's a musician, and that's why I'm getting this word. But yes, being in Ridley's head was very anxiety inducing, but like it's supposed to be, and you do an amazing job with that. Which actually sort of leads into the next thing I wanted to ask you.
Okay.
I know we're sort of skipping around, but we're like touching on so many, it's just like very naturally segs into it. But the mental health rep in this book is some of the best that I have ever read in YA. And it's so realistic, and you treat your characters with such care and sensitivity. And I'm curious whether you started out wanting to write about a character with depression and anxiety, or how that figured into your drafting process, and just, how you decided to write him this way.
I think that was definitely something I wanted to put on the page. That was some rep I wanted to see. I also really wanted to put a positive spin where, on mental health services. And I have, a resource book, like a resource page on the back of my book, where people, if they see themselves in Ridley, they have some kind of places that they can go to get help, or if they see themselves in Jubilee, who, does have some of her own things going on too. So I always knew that. And then I thought of like, so I had these feuding families from different parts of the comic world, and I also write comics. So that's actually something, that it's just part of my life. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. So that kind of lends itself to this like Romeo and Juliet retelling. And if you really like look at that, that's a pretty toxic romance. So I wanted to address that in my book, that it's, that there are unhealthy parts to it, and then kind of show a way out potentially, where I leave them. I don't want to spoil, but I felt like I left them in like a really natural, organic place to get to, and like a healthier spot.
For sure.
So that was definitely, so having a character with anxiety and depression, I knew was always something that I really wanted to capture, and I wanted to capture it in a way that didn't vilify them, but very much wasn't a like love cures all story either. Or like, I am gonna, this person has fixed me or makes me want to be this, now I'm gonna snap my fingers, because that's not how it works in real life.
Right. And I think you do such an amazing job with that. It feels, I always feel like as a YA author, writing for children and teens, like you do have some responsibility in showing like hope at the end, and showing like realistic versions of hope. And I think you do such a wonderful job with that. I loved it. And as I was reading that, I was working on both characters in my next YA are dealing with some mental illness, but it's very much something that is like under control for both of them. And I just love seeing, I love seeing books with mental illness where it's not a plot point and it's not like it's not a like we're talking about, like, you know, love can save you from depression or something. Right. Because like another person cannot have that responsibility foisted upon them.
Right. Yeah, I definitely, you know, that was definitely something that was very, I'm sorry, she's just, she's just going to do this, I guess. So I just lost my train of thought, but yeah, that was definitely, you know, I'm sorry, my cat is crawling all over me right now. I have completely, like, my thought has gone out the window now.
Oh, that's okay. Oh no, I was saying just about not relying on another person to cure your depression. And
right. Yeah. So I wanted to show that Ridley was living with this, whether he was managing it well or not. Oh, the cat's name is Tallulah Kitten Cat. I just saw that pop up in the chat. And she's trouble. A lot of trouble, as you can see. But getting back to Ridley, yes, I really wanted to show someone that was living with it. I think we, you know, especially someone that is living with it where it's always going to be a part of their lives and there's not going to be like a magic cure.
Yeah.
So Seattle, as you say in your author's note, it's kind of like a love letter. And as someone who's never been there, I still felt like very like in the moment and like I was experiencing all of that with them. One of the things I was wondering was, how did you balance that? Because it seems like such a huge task to kind of, because it is almost like another character in the book, to tell us everything that like someone like me who lives in upstate New York, to tell us everything that we need to know to get it without like slowing the pace or bogging down the plot. How'd you do it?
Yeah, I have always loved, you know, different forms of media that are love letters to cities, and I felt like Seattle hadn't really gotten one yet. And not that mine is like the only definitive love letter for Seattle. I'm sure there are others out there that I just haven't encountered. But I definitely did struggle with making every place that they go in the book feel important to the plot. I was so certain from the very beginning that I wanted them to go to a record store because, like, Seattle people are just music snobs. And I don't think I've ever written a character who isn't a music snob to some degree. Like, all my characters have slightly different taste in music, and all of them are convinced their taste is, you know, the best. As anyone growing up in Seattle would be. So yeah, I wanted them to go to a record store, and I had a really hard time like deciding what to do there and like how to make it important to the plot. I also, for a while, there is a sculpture in Seattle. It's called Black Hole Sun, and it inspired the Soundgarden song. The Soundgarden is from Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
And the sculpture is a round, like black, I think it's marble. And if you look through it, it frames the Space Needle perfectly. It's really cool. Yeah. If anyone listening opens up a tab and just Googles like Black Hole Sun sculpture, you'll see it. And it's at a park, and the park also has an observatory that's like many, many steps to get up to the top. And I had in the old version, like they were playing Howl, which is the scavenger hunt / assassin game that they're playing on the last day of school. There was like a big chase scene that took place in the observatory. And I had like the Black Hole Sun there, and I think I just couldn't make it work geographically. But that was something that I it didn't make it in there. And yet I was like, Record Store needs to be there, even if it isn't 100% like moving the book forward. So yeah, it was definitely a challenge. I had a lot of maps. I had a lot of things that probably looked like a football coach would, write plays or something.
So is your time is the time like accurate? Because I know every chapter has a time stamp. I know that they have extreme luck with parking.
Yes. So a couple months ago, a friend and I, with masks, we did it safely. We went around Seattle and took these very extra photos of me with the book in various places mentioned in the book. And it took a really long time. And we only did like 6 places. And at the end, I was like, there is just no way they could do the entire thing, especially given how many breaks they take just to like dance in the library and like go eat Shabbat dinner. So yeah, I'm fairly certain at this point that the book is not possible. Like realistically, but I don't know. I mean, we were kind of dawdling too, so maybe it is. It's just it would have to be a 0 traffic day. And so both of us have both of our books have like really big elements of fandom. I mean, I think both of our books are also just really filled with like love for something else. Like with mine, definitely Seattle, and the main character, Rowan, wants to write romance novels. And then yours, obviously, comics. It's in the title. And the main characters like really bond over their love for comics. And I know you write graphic novels too. I would love to hear more about your history with comics and how they found their way into this book.
I do a lot of Comic-Cons in like the old life when we could do large public gatherings. I have for several years gone to various Comic-Cons, and I would table in Artist Alley, which is like where Vera is in Verona Comics. So it's just an environment, it's a setting that I'm in all the time. So it was super natural for me to just kind of like incorporate that. And as much as T3 is kind of a love letter to Seattle, this was kind of a love letter to, my time, which in comic shops and at Comic-Cons and with cosplay and things like that. So it was just like a supernatural setting for me to choose. And I spend time, when you're kind of just wandering, like you're kind of like people watching in Artist Alley, you are waiting for people to come and you're sort of pitching your wares the whole time, and you just get a lot of good people watching time. And I would always be like, oh, like those two definitely have like a thing happening, like table, like
a con crush.
And, right, a con
like
crush.
Yeah.
And I would just be like, watching it and like writing these little romances in my head where I'm like, oh, maybe they're gonna like go and and so I was like, I should just do this. So I really wanted to capture that. And the description of Veras Store, which is Jubilee's mom, pretty much almost exactly is the layout of my local tiny comic store. So it's really modeled after all of that kind of stuff.
I love that. And do you cosplay yourself?
No, not in any way that I'm gonna admit.
Okay.
Not in any, like we've done it for like Halloween and stuff like that. But when I'm at a Comic-Con, I'm always working, so I don't get to like do that stuff. Like I might do it to like a small extent behind my table, but I need to be able to like be on my feet for like 12 hours and like make change for people, which cosplay costumes usually don't have pockets. So
yeah, that would be difficult.
Yeah. And like you said, you touched on, Rowan and her romance. I loved how you treated that and how, kind of protective she was over it. why did you want to, like, what drew you to that and exploring that?
Yeah, so it was, I've mentioned this before, but it was not something that was in the first draft. So Rowan's parents were always, you know, somewhat famous children's book authors. But in my first drafts, she wanted to be a politician. And I found especially with all the last day of school stuff going on, it was really hard to give her a complete character arc. Because it was really hard to have her accomplish something on this one day. I mean, if a 24-hour book that does an amazing job is The Voting Booth by Brandy Colbert that came out last month. But that book, like, it is all focused on like voting. I felt like I couldn't, with everything else going on, I just like couldn't write a political book with, I felt like I would need to give it my full attention if I were writing a political book. So I really took some time to brainstorm after I wrote, you know, my terrible first draft. And I was like, Rowan needs a new hobby and like a new want. And I had always shied away from making my characters writers. And I had kind of judged people who did, because I was like, you're just writing yourself if you're writing a main character who's a writer. And now I can hardcore judge myself for literally writing a character who is a romance author. And then my book that is coming out after it is my first romance novel. But the more I thought about it, the more I really loved. It was something that I hadn't seen done before. I think there are actually a couple upcoming YAs that have main characters who want to be romance authors, which is really cool. In my head, I want them all to be friends. But I hadn't seen it done before, and I'm always really drawn to characters with passions that we haven't seen 100 times in YA. Even though I think anything can be done new and like kind of reinvented, but yeah, I hadn't seen a main character who wanted to write romance novels. And at the same time, I was sort of like rediscovering romance novels after a lifetime of being told that they are lesser and, you know, being judged for reading them. Like I used to hide, you know, like my Meg Cabot books when I was in middle school. And then by the time I got to high school, I was just like, you know, if it's not F. Scott Fitzgerald, then I don't care. I really was like very much a Neil about it. And I didn't feel like any other books had like literary merit. Or, I mean, that was like kind of the facade that I put up. And then deep down, I was like, okay, these are the books that I'm supposed to read. And like my Meg Cabot books can just sadly sit off to the side. So I think part of it was also just like writing my journey in realizing that it is okay to love these things that are designed to bring people joy and are not causing anyone harm. And why is anyone like judging them in this harsh way? And I loved that Rowan was able to go on that journey as well and gradually becoming more confident, and not just as a romance reader, but as a writer too.
I think that actually kind of leads directly into another question that I had for you, which was how much of yourself did you put in these characters? Were you like them in high school? I mean, we've kind of just talked about how you were kind of like a Neil, but a little birdie told me that you had a band. Does that fall into like your music snobbery at all? Or what's I mean,
I was definitely like a snob just for all of it. Maybe it's just something, I mean, I think as a teen, you're very much like anything that you discover, it feels so intensely personal. Like it wasn't, you know, they obviously were not like big when I was in high school, but like I remember discovering the Smiths and being like, oh my God, I'm the first person who's ever listened to the Smiths. Like I have such amazing taste in music. You know,
so
like
also like the guy from 500 Days of Summer. You're like Neil and you're that guy.
I know, seriously, right? Like I felt so validated by that movie when I saw it. But I think like so many people go through that phase where you just experience something so strongly and it speaks to you on such a visceral level that you're like, this had to be written for me. Whether that's, you know, a song or a book or something. So yeah, I definitely had some of that snobbishness. But like Rowan, I had a lot of passions that I was not letting people know about. Like I did write, I wrote stuff on Fiction Press that is still up there because I don't have access to that email address again. There's like a romance about genies that's been up there for like 15 years.
Do you think that will ever you'll ever recycle that idea?
No, I don't think so. I think that the whole story was built on the idea of me wanting to write the main character asking the genie, like, I wish you would kiss me, and the genie being like, you don't have to wish for that.
Oh my God, please write it. Please.
I'm sure it's been done. But yeah, so I wrote, 30 chapters just to get to that point on Fiction Press. But never told anyone. Until now.
Your adult romance, that'll be like your next adult romance after that.
Yeah. Well, I need to know now too what you were like in high school. Were you reading comics, writing? What were you doing?
I was writing. I always I wanted to be a writer forever. I was kind of like a mix because I was hanging out with all of my friends were like skaters and they were in bands and stuff, but I also was taking all like AP classes, and I was on this kind of like a dual thing where I was also like enrolled at a college, and so I was pretty much my senior year was like just AP and college classes. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of both.
I was very similar to you, actually. Like I was, an AP kid, and then I was moonlighting as I had like an all-girl punk rock band.
Yeah.
So it was like living in two worlds.
Really good friends.
I think so. Yeah. I had one other question for you, is that I love that all of your books have these really hooky concepts. Like you can describe them in a sentence and I just immediately want to read them. And I'm sure that is the case for many other people. And I am just someone who I am so drawn to like really catchy concepts. And it's just something I really admire about yours. So it's true of Hot Dog Girl and Verona Comics, and then Some Girls Do, which comes out next year. And it's pitched as a queer romance about an openly gay track star who falls for a closeted bisexual beauty queen with a penchant for fixing up old cars, which I love the sound of. So with a new project, do you generally start with a concept, a character, a premise? Could you talk us through that process?
There is never a plot, which I think I saw like Kelsey pop up in the chat and she can like attest to. I'm usually like texting my friend, like, is this a plot? And they'll be like, well, that's kind of a goal. Like that's sort of a stake if you like squint. I'm like, but is it like, can I write this? And it's like, well, it's two people eating soup. So like,
but how hot is the soup?
Right.
Those can be the stakes.
Tension. Right. So it's usually the characters, but I usually get like a flash of a scene in my head. Like I mentioned for Verona Comics, it was just this idea of her like putting up a yellow balloon that she drew a bat on for like a bat signal. And I'm like, okay, why is this girl doing this? That's like the most random thing. And then I developed pretty much the whole story around that idea. So yeah, it always just, for me, it starts with a random scene in my head that just kind of like, I don't know where it comes from. And I have to sort of write like backwards and forwards. I used to take a really long time to like get to the point. My drafts used to be like 150,000. My first drafts would be like 120, 150K. Hot Dog Girl was like 120K in the first draft.
No.
Yeah, which is like, that's like
God.
A huge, like that's like a giant fantasy novel. That's like.
What was the final word count?
I think it was like 78.
So you like cut it in half almost.
Yeah, pretty much. But now I'm on I have so many balls in the air with different projects that are going on. Some you could hopefully be able to talk more about soon, some new ones. But I don't have time. So going back to our mutual friend, Kelsey, she gave me this like Excel sheet.
Oh, I have the same one.
Yeah. And it's pretty much like, okay, like for me, it was like a game changer. But sometimes when I send it to people, if they're like me, they're like blown away. And if they actually know how to plot, they're like, this just says you need like a beginning, middle, and end. And I'm like, don't you know, like that's a game changer, right? To know all those things before you draft 100,000 words. So yeah, it usually starts with a scene, but now I put in like a lot of effort to make sure that there's a plot before I start drafting, because I just don't have time to throw out half of my book every time.
Yeah, no, I've definitely had similar things where like a lot of times I've started with just like a flash of a scene. Like I actually think the most recent time that happened for me was Our Year of Maybe, which was a while ago in terms of drafting. And now I will often start with either a full premise or I will have something I know I want to write about, and then it takes some brainstorming to come up with a plot. Like I'm about to start drafting my second adult romance. And for a long time, I wanted to write about a meteorologist at a local TV station. And I was just like, I want to write about a weather girl who was like at this like local TV station. I feel like there would be a lot of like fun hijinks. But I'm like, the plot isn't just like, how is she going to forecast the weather? Like those aren't the stakes. Like I needed, and the plot is like, it's the workplace rom-com, and the plot involves her job, but it's not like literally about being a meteorologist. I promise this book is going to be a lot more fun than I am pitching it right now. But yeah, like it takes a while to get to that sometimes. But definitely doing the work first saves yourself a lot of pain later.
That is a lesson that I'm learning. This kind of ties into what we were just talking about before this, when we were really talking about our high school selves. But I really do want to know, if you could relive one day of high school, if you could have like a do-over, what day would you do? That's
such a good question. I'm surprised that it hasn't come up yet, related to T3 yet.
So I can't even like take credit.
What?
Kelsey actually thought of it.
Oh my God, Kelsey is the MVP of this.
We should invite her up on the...
She would hate us. This is going to sound... Well, okay. I was like torn on two answers, but okay. I think I actually would pick my last day of school because I was so anti-school spirit, because I was like, I'm cool. I wasn't. But I was like, I'm going to try to be cool, and I'm not into school spirit. I'm not going to go to any football games. I'm just going to sit there like during every assembly. I didn't participate in any last day of school festivities, activities. I was just so over it. There was like an all-night senior party that I didn't go to. I think I was like one of the very few people that didn't go. And I was like so anxious about it because I was like, I was very like shy and very introverted, and I think I still am to a degree. But back then, the idea of like going to an all-night party with like your entire senior class was like, who am I going to hang out with? And that just seemed like the biggest and scariest thing, is like, what if I'm standing there alone? So I don't know. I really wish I could go back and redo that and just be like totally fine with being alone. I wish that my younger self had been okay with doing that, because like being alone can be great. It took me so long before I was like comfortable going to a restaurant and like having a meal by myself, but it is like actually a really lovely and like peaceful thing to do.
I started a couple years ago going to movies by myself, which I
my husband does that too.
I'm like that I was stood up or something, you know what I mean? Like I got like so in my head, and it was like so great to just like experience. Like I love it. I just don't want anyone to go with me. And now I get invited. I'm like, ugh. I mean, well, now I would kill to go to a movie with someone. But it was fun. Like I saw the Avengers like opening night. I saw, because I love all the all the superhero movies, and I went and saw them like opening night by myself, and then the next day I saw them with my friends, and it was so nice to just be like fully in it and be like, okay, if I want to like cheer, I want to cry, like nobody's going to judge me because I'm never going to see these people again.
I like that. Wait, did I ask you what day you would redo? And also, if other people have questions, they can drop them in the box. I know we're sort of getting toward the end.
Yes, we'll do.
And one of the questions we already answered, and the other one is Kelsey's.
Oh,
so we can do with that as we wish.
So I actually was giving this some thought, and I think I would redo. This is like a very romancy, like on brand. I would redo Prom. So I actually had a really cool, I went as like Cruella de Vil. I always did this like weird, like my junior prom, I went as like, I don't know, it was just like this thing. I used it as like an excuse to cosplay. And so I actually had a really great prom. And then it was kind of like one of those like movie things where I graduated. My graduating class was like very, well, massive for around here. We had like 700 kids in my graduating class. So about 50 of us of varying, like, you know, like friends and friends of friends, we all had rented out this sort of like bunch of cabins in the woods and had like this huge after party. And so the reason I would redo it is because that was so fun. But in the middle of it, this boy who went to another school who I kind of like had a thing for, he came up and was like, oh, he was like hanging out, but he was super shy. And he's like, do you want to like just go get coffee? And I was having so much fun. I was like, why? Like, I'm not going to leave all, like, I have like 50 of my friends here. Like, I mean, I wasn't like mean about it, but I was like, I'm having a good time. Like, won't you just stay? And then, you know, he didn't stay. And then I didn't realize, because I have no game until the next day. I'm like talking to my best friend. I'm like, can you believe he came? That was like so amazing. Like, I wonder if that means anything. And they were like, he asked you to like leave and get coffee with him. He was like hitting on you. And I was like, no. And then there was like, you know, it was just the end of the year. And I was like, it was like crazy getting ready for all my like finals. And there just wasn't any time. And that was just it. I think I saw him like once at Friendly's after that.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And so I would like redo and get that cup of coffee. Like, it was like one of those like sliding doors moments.
Oh, it totally is.
Right?
I mean, as soon as you said that, I'm like, your life diverged into two timelines at that point.
I know.
And in that timeline, like, yeah, who even knows?
I know. And I just like sat, yeah, it just wasn't like, and then it wasn't even fun after he left, because I was like, what does it mean that he came? Like, it didn't like.
What does it mean that he asked me to get coffee?
Right. It was like definitely not my like proudest moment. So
it's a good one though.
That would be my do-over, because I'm really curious.
Oh, there's a good question from Kathleen Glasgow. Thank you. And it is, Rachel and Jennifer, your new books have such great covers. Can you talk about the design process and how involved you were?
I actually was given a lot of input on mine. I work with Jeff Osberg, has done all of my covers that you have seen. And I love working with him, and we do chat a little bit outside of it, just because we have some mutual friends, just from me working in comics and from other illustrators and stuff. But I was very lucky in that my team was like very receptive, because a lot of times like you get your cover and that's it. And especially for Hot Dog Girl, the first cover that they brought to me was very, we were on very different pages for how we wanted to like portray it. And I was really like, it really did mean a lot that my team like really listened to me. We went back to the drawing board. But at this point, I think my illustrator, Jeff, has a really good handle on, and he's done some other really amazing book covers too. And so he pretty much just knocks it out of the park.
Your covers are like among my favorites in YA. They are just so good. I love just the colors he uses. I mean, just how this one really has the comics vibe, and then with Hot Dog Girl, like those purples are just so beautiful. So for my YA covers, my experience has been I was asked, like, is there anything that you hate and like definitely don't want to see? But most of the time I've just been presented with a close to final cover and I've loved it. Like this cover had like 0 changes. Like they showed this to me and I was like, yeah. And I was like, this is absolute perfection. Like I cannot imagine a better cover for this book. Like it just tells the whole story. But then my adult book coming out in January, The X Talk. It is a romantic comedy set in the world of public radio. I was actually given 3 different covers to choose from. And it was really great because my editor, agent, and I all chose the same cover. And we're like, okay, yeah, that's definitely the right one. So yeah, that was my first experience seeing, or that was my first like different experience with cover stuff. But yeah, it's always so exciting to see how someone else like visually interprets it, because it's like never anything that you can conceptualize until you see it.
Yeah. And then our designers just like really pull it together, even like with like the typeset. It's amazing how like we're in like the cover phase right now with Some Girls Do. And so they're showing me like different like fonts and stuff. I'm sure like there's like a different special name for them when they're like typeset, but it's just amazing how like the like typography or whatever can super change the way that it looks.
Yeah, definitely. Does anyone, if there aren't any other questions, I mean, we can just wrap up with maybe, I know we've kind of said what we're working on next, but if we have anything longer to add, perhaps, or I don't know if Claire wanted to hop on and say anything to wrap it up.
Here I am hopping. Oh my God, I have enjoyed this conversation so much.
Oh, good.
I appreciate you taking me back to high school and making me think about things that I haven't thought about in a really long time. Because I'm pretty sure that I'm considerably older than both of you, which means that I'm sorry, Rachel, but I get to claim the Smiths. I'm sorry.
Wait, I didn't discover them in 2004.
Yeah, for me it was the late 80s, so that's how old I am. Anyway, but there were some of your insights tonight were so wonderful. I love the bit of the piece about when you're writing, slowing down the fast things and speeding up the slow things that happen in reality.
I've got to figure out who to attribute that to.
It's really smart. Yeah. I mean, I'm not a writer. I'm 100% a reader, but I completely appreciate it. I mean, it makes me think about things. It'll make me think about things that I read differently. So, and then that thing about youth and like how they're just these small moments, these little things that when they happen feel huge. Mm-hmm. And I remember that. And I don't know if that's something that like I don't want to think that we lose that as we get older, but I think that it's not as frequent maybe or something. But what a great conversation tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And everybody, I am obliged to remind everyone that you can easily purchase the books from both of our authors tonight by following the little green button center screen there. Thank you, Jennifer. And it'll take you right to our website. And again, you can get signed book plates from Jennifer. And does anybody have any last words? Author.
Just a long pause.
Nothing. Everybody's
No,
saying thank you.
I'm so glad to get to do this with Village
meowing,
Books.
so.
Oh.
She wants to leave. She's done.
That's
So
so
that was
funny.
her
Well,
sign off.
Okay, well, we
Well,
should
here-
respect Jen's cat.
there they
And
both are together.
Thank you all so much for being here. This was a lot of fun.
Yes,
All right.
thank you.
Okay, well, it is exactly 6 o'clock, so I think we'll say over and out. So thank you again, both of you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.